Hello, I'm Sky Matsuhashi, founder of SmartPokerStudy.com, the place for poker players who are always striving to be better today than they were yesterday. Poker people, make sure you listen to episode 83, where I gave you 5 poker quote-unquote rules worth breaking today, and it is good pod, baby. Hey, poker people. The success of this show is all thanks to you sharing it with your friends, subscribing, downloading, leaving iTunes, Stitcher reviews, whatever kind of reviews you want to leave. You make this show grow week to week in downloads, and I appreciate that very much, everyone. And dude, last week I told you I was taking the family to see Ghostbusters. Well, last minute, my older son didn't want to see it at all, so instead we hit up The Secret Life of Pets. And I've got to say, what a frickin' snooze fest. Literally, I dozed off twice while we were watching it, you know. There were some funny moments, I have to admit, but too much non-funny stuff with animal characters that I really just didn't give a crap about, you know. I'm generally not a pet person. We don't have a pet in the house other than a pet fish. But oftentimes, I do like animals in movies, you know. Finding Nemo, I was totally into. Kung Fu Panda, I'm hella into. How to Train Your Dragon, Madagascar, Ratatouille, Chicken Little, I'm down with all of those. But dogs and cats at home while the master's away, yeah, not so much. So, a disappointing movie, but still pretty cool to hang out with the family on a Saturday. Well, that's enough of that kind of stuff. Let's get to the pokers. Today, I am featuring 3 questions from some cool poker peeps, so let's get to it. Visit today's show notes at www.smartpokerstudy.com/pod85 for links to everything I discussed today and to join the weekly boost for exclusive poker strategy delivered directly to your inbox. The first question today comes from Mike Tappert. I answered a great question from him last week about bounty games, or knockout bounty games. And here's another question about poker study groups from Mike. Good afternoon, Sky. I have another question for you that might be an interesting topic to talk about. As you know, I host a bi-weekly, relatively low buy-in poker tournament game with a big group of friends and acquaintances. Some of the more serious guys in my group and I are talking about getting a small group together every other week to talk about poker outside of actually playing a game. What types of things do you think would be good to go over? Any particular format you think would be more beneficial for the group to follow? Our plan right now is for everyone to bring at least one interesting hand they saw in a video, or a discussion from a podcast, or something they read in a poker book for us to debate, discuss, or work on our math, etc. Thanks again. Mike at UTG Poker on Instagram. And I've mentioned it before, but go on Instagram, check out at UTG Poker for Mike's pretty cool chip set there. He even has plaques with his chip sets, not just standard chips, but actual, like, you know, Paris plaques, that kind of thing. So anyway, thank you for that question, Mike. And I think it's great that you're going to be a part of this group. And I think the format that you've started with is perfect to start with. I'd love to see it eventually morph into something else in the future. Like, instead of just everybody bringing hand histories willy-nilly, you can discuss a specific topic from week to week where everyone will consider it ahead of time and bring their thoughts, their ideas, their questions, maybe example hands and videos, chapters that they read, you know, bring that stuff to the group, but surrounding a topic instead of just one hand a week or, you know, a few hands a week, whatever you end up covering. And when it gets to this point, you can actually lead this and choose the topics to discuss. You could do lots of research online, watch videos, read articles and books, and bring your findings to the group. That's where I'd like to see you take this group in the future, Mike. But for now, everyone will have different hands to discuss, and it should make for some interesting talk among many different subjects each week. You should have a list of questions ready for each hand that you bring to the group, and you want these questions there in order to help add to the discussion. So, for example, maybe your hand that you bring one week has a lot of pre-flop action between maybe like a reckless donk and yourself. You 4-bet pre-flop with a hand like ace-king, and he called. The flop comes ace-9-8 rainbow, and he makes a good-sized check raise. Here are some example questions that you can ask your study partners regarding this hand. What's our range here as the pre-flop 4-better? What's villain's range here for calling the 4-bet out of position? The next question could be, what reads on the villain could aid our flop decision? What history might come into play? Another question is there anything about the tourney or cash table that would influence your thought process here? Like, are you near the money, in the money? Is it a super aggressive table, very passive with 5 to 6 people at every flop? Is there a ton of aggression going on post-flop? Whatever the situation is. Another question is, what's the break even on our call on the flop? How often is he bluffing? And with his bet sizing, how often does it have to work? Another question might be, what do you think the equity of your hand is versus the villain's range? And when you talk about equity and ranges and stuff, make sure you have a computer or like an app on your phone where you could use Flopzilla or an equity calculator to find the answer to these kinds of questions. So there are so many more questions you could ask, and right now I'd like to refer you all back to episode number 82, where I discussed the importance of asking the right questions when studying poker. In that episode, I also gave a quote from Voltaire: "Judge a man by his questions rather than his answers." And that line, that quote, definitely applies here. And the better questions you and your study mates ask, the more you'll get out of your time together. Above all, though, do your best to have a good, fun discussion during these meetups. As soon as it feels like homework or people are being attacked for their thoughts on poker, your group will start to have less participants, and it could even just disband quite soon and stop altogether. Once you have your group established, decide as a group to discuss anybody new coming in, discuss this together before that person is invited. If Bob over there wants to invite Bill, and you all think Bill's a negative, pessimistic, bad beat storyteller, and you think he won't add much to the group, tell Bob not to invite Bill at all. And one other thing, I want you to treat this as an opportunity to teach others what you know. Like I said before, I want this group to morph into a weekly concept group that you end up leading. When you do this, you'll tend to start teaching on a subject because you'll be the one coming most prepared each week. When you teach a concept, whatever the concept or area of study, there are 4 benefits that we gain from it. The first benefit is a greater understanding of the subject matter. Benefit 2, improved social and communication skills. Benefit 3, increased self-esteem and self-confidence. And benefit 4, personal growth through challenging oneself. And the importance of teaching was the subject of July's Patreon podcast that I sent out to supporters of me through Patreon. The podcast episode is called Learning Poker by Teaching. And here's a quick excerpt from that Patreon-only podcast. All right, so now I definitely want to talk about how you, as a current poker player and a poker studier, how you can practice teaching poker to others. Now, what I don't want you to do is go out there and label yourself a teacher or a coach until you feel like you really want to be one and you're ready for it. But for now, you can act as if. And even though you aren't a coach, you can act like one within your interactions with other people. And here are some areas where you can teach others what you know about poker. So the first area, there's 3 areas I want to discuss right now, but the first one is posting in forums. So hit up the poker forums. The next area where you can actually practice teaching poker is you can lead a study group. So what I want you to do is start a poker study group with friends or acquaintances that you know from Facebook, that kind of thing. It can be via, a Skype study group, Google Hangout, an in-person meeting, whatever you want. And since you're the one who started it, act as if you're the organizer and the teacher. Create topics of study and come to each session fully prepared to teach the subject matter. But don't act like the teacher, though. In your mind, you're the teacher and you have these concepts that you want to express, these opinions and ideas and everything. But I don't want you to actually give a lecture. The people that you're studying with, they're not gonna want a lecture from you. They want to hear your opinions and they want to bounce ideas back and forth and everything. So what I would like you to do is start with one point at a time and elicit feedback and thoughts from others as you discuss the topics and everything within your notes. And if you're leading, for example, if you're leading a study session all about double barreling, come prepared with 2 or 3 hands to discuss. You should have your thoughts fully put together and listed out so you can hit every single point. And I want you to know these hands that you're covering inside and out. Run the math ahead of time and do the Flopzilla work ahead of time as well. Come prepared with your own questions that you can ask the other people. Even if you have the answer, just come prepared with questions to elicit feedback from them.
Their feedback can help inform your own thoughts on the subject matter. So at every single study session, you should be the most prepared out of all the participants, just as if you were the teacher. Like I mentioned before from that research study, if you prepare with the idea of having to teach it in mind, you'll learn the subject matter better than if you were studying to take a test or just studying for shits and giggles, you know? All right, the final way that I have for you to practice teaching Well, that's pretty good stuff if I say so myself. And if that excerpt sounded valuable to you and you're interested in getting this entire podcast where I discuss the value of teaching, what you know to others, and more ways to practice teaching, just support me through Patreon for the month of August at the $5 level or higher. As soon as you do, I'll send you a copy of July's podcast called Learning Poker by Teaching. I've received some really good feedback on this episode so far, and I'm sure that you'll get a ton out of it. Just visit www.smartpokerstudy.com/Patreon to learn more and to support me. Alrighty, thanks much for that question again, Mike. Okay, question 2 comes to us from Isaac. We went back and forth in email quite a bit, but his question ended up being, what is your opening range for microstakes MTTs? Thanks for that question, Isaac. And my ranges start off pretty tight in early position and middle position, and I'm stealing a whole heck of a lot in the cutoff button and the small blind. My ranges tighten, though, as the tourney progresses, and my stack size starts to shrink in big blinds, as well as maybe my stack size is growing. Maybe I still have 70 BBs, but if everybody around me has 15 to 20 BBs, I'll start to shrink my ranges as well, especially if they end up being really shove or reshove happy. But if they're folding a lot and letting me chip up more even when I'm a big stack, I'll keep my same ranges. But here are my opening ranges by position for MTTs when in the early and mid stages. And you can see these in the show notes. So in early position, which is under the gun +1, and MP1, my opening range is any pocket pair, ace 10 suited or better, ace queen off or better, king jack suited or better, king queen off, and queen jack suited or better. This is 10.7% or 142 combos. So in the early positions, I am pretty darn tight right there. Except I do go down to every single pocket pair I open to 3 big blinds. So in the middle position, which I consider it the middle position, but it's MP2 through the hijack. So that's deuces or better, ace deuce suited, ace 10 off or better, king 10 suited or better, king jack offsuit or better, queen 10 suited or better, 7-6 suited or better. And that is 17.9% or 238 combos. So it's increased a bit there. In the cutoff, though, this is when things really jump up. My range opens up here big time because it's the first steal spot. So my range in the cutoff is any pocket pair, ace deuce or better, so ace deuce off and ace deuce suited, king 9 suited, king 10 offsuit, queen 9 suited, queen 10 offsuit or better, 7-5 suited or better, 6-5 suited or better, and 10-9 offsuit or better. And that ends up being 32.1% of hands or 426 combos. So you can see it's a big jump up from the middle position, which was 238 combos. And the button where I get the loosest, the widest range is any pocket pair, ace deuce or better, king 7 suited, king 9 offsuit or better, queen 8 suited, queen 9 offsuit, jack 9 offsuit, 10-7 suited, 7-5 suited or better, 6-5 suited or better, and 8-7 offsuit or better, for a total of 38.2% of hands that I'm raising there, or opening with there, and which ends up being 506 combos. And in the small blind, my opening range there is the same as the button range, at least until that I know the big blind defends a whole lot. Then I might decrease because I don't want to play, or I don't want to open out of position when I know that the big blind is going to call quite often. Now, I will also say that my cutoff button and small blind opening ranges, they can expand or contract based on who is in the blinds. Very nitty players, and I'll open a whole lot more. Very loose players who fight back a lot, and I'll end up tightening up. So, Cuckoo, thanks for that question, Isaac. And I actually responded with the above to Isaac already, and he responded with another question. But before I get to that second question, let's talk a little bit more about Patreon. So I mentioned it a little bit ago, but if you support me on Patreon, you get some exclusive poker strategy content that I won't deliver anywhere else. So that podcast which was called Learn Poker by Teaching, it will not be put out as a regular podcast. Being a thank you for Patreon supporters, that that's the way it's gonna be. I'm not gonna release it to the general public if it's supposed to be something as a thank you for supporting me. So there are different levels of support, and with each level comes different rewards. You can get over-the-top podcast shoutouts, early release podcasts, extra patron-only podcasts and videos, monthly webinars, copies of my future ebooks, and more just for supporting me with a small monthly contribution. There are also some crazy goals that I've set. Help me hit these monthly goals and you'll hear more strategy content in the form of more questions answered, longer podcasts, or even more frequently scheduled podcasts. Who knows, with your help, I might be podcasting 5 days per week. So to learn more or to support me, please visit www.patreon.com/smartpokerstudy. And just yesterday, my man Dennis Peterson pledged $50 to support me in Patreon. I'm freaking blown away by your generosity, Dennis. And wow, Mama and Papa Peterson raised one hell of a dude. And no wonder, you're Canadian. They raised them right way up there in the north. You know, I bet in high school you were valedictorian, probably voted most likely to succeed, most handsome, and voted most likely to swim in poon. You guys do call it poon up there in Canada, right? I mean, eh? You guys do call it poon up there in Canada, eh? Anywho, it's about time you were recognized for your awesomeness in this podcast, Dennis. So once again, I appreciate all you do for me, and thank you very much. Well, back to the pokers, and let's get back to Isaac's follow-up question. Well, he goes on, well, talking about the open ranges that you sent me, how do you calculate the ranges on the bubble and near the final table bubble? I have big problems on those, and I think that will be the key to breaking the micros. Thanks for the follow-up, Isaac. I really appreciate this second question. It allowed me to get a little bit deeper here with you. And when it comes to bubble play and the final two tables, or, final table bubble, my ranges might tighten up a bit, but they won't expand much at all. Let's say the worst ace that I'll normally open in middle position is ace-10 offsuit. I won't be adding ace-9 off or below to my middle position range, but I might not open ace-10 off anymore, and I could restrict it to ace-jack off or ace-queen off, depending on those yet to act and how dangerous the situation is. And speaking of situations, everything is situational at these 2 points, like we said, the money bubble and the final table bubble. I'll look at the players at my table and determine who to best steal from, who to call shoves against, who to re-steal against, all those kinds of things. I'll really look at the players at my table. I restrict my steals to only the button and cutoff. So in the hijack or before, it's generally just value opens right there. And I definitely adopt a very tight small blind range depending on my big blind opponent. And I will pay particular attention to the players in the cutoff and the button when I'm in the blinds, as I might need to defend against them for some needed chips or to stop them from taking advantage of the bubble to chip up, using my blind money. I'll also look to see which players are likely to call down lighter than normal, and I'll restrict my shoving and reshoving ranges against them, and I'll mostly be going for value when I'm reshoving. The players I'm talking about here they're the loose passive guys that will call 15 BB shoves with suited aces, mid pocket pairs, and broadways. They'll be calling 15 BBs when they only have 20 or 25 BBs for themselves. And sure, it's great that they call with these weaker ranges, but that means that I shouldn't be shoving bad aces, small pocket pairs, or suited middle cards because they're calling with a lot of better hands. If I'm stealing, I want a reasonable chance of success, so I don't want those loose callers to still be in the hand, and I don't want to be trying to steal with those weaker hands. And I will try to steal liberally from nits, and I will look for good spots to jam or rejam or raise over limpers to pick up a lot of chips as well. And these situations take a lot of practice, and I would recommend reviewing all of your bubble hands the next day after you play the tournament. Becoming a better bubble player comes from lots of play, paying attention to your opponents, and learning from your mistakes. And one thing that I found when I'm trying to review bubble hands the next day, Poker Tracker 4, it doesn't tell me when the bubble is. I have to try to remember that. So I make note of every bubble I'm in, and all you have to really do is make note of a few hands at the bubble. Once you look through your hand history in Poker Tracker 4, you'll find those hands and you'll know where the bubble was. You know what I mean? You can even actually write down the bubble started when I had King
King 10 suited, then Ace 4 offsuit, then Jack 9 offsuit. And the bubble ended when I had pocket aces and I busted the player on the bubble. I mean, if you make a note like that for yourself, the next day when you're reviewing those bubble hands, you'll find that bubble quick and easy. So thank you again for that question, Isaac, and good luck busting dem bubbles. Thank you everyone for listening, and thanks again to Mike and Isaac for those questions featured today. And Dennis, thanks for that killer Patreon support. And for today, I hope all my answers to the questions boost everybody's poker skills. If you're not already there, head over to the show notes page for everything discussed today at www.smartspokerstudy.com/pod85 and send me that feedback through the show notes, email to sky@smartpokerstudy.com, or post in the Facebook group at smartpokerstudy.com/discuss. And if you have any questions that you would like featured on the show, please send them through all those channels just mentioned. Alrighty, poker people, I'll be back in 1 week's time with another Q&A, and I know that you know that word of mouth is the best advertising, and me love you long time for sharing the show with other poker people. It only grows with your help, so I'm asking you to share it with someone who will get value from it just like you do. Send them to the show notes page to get them started on all that this podcast has to offer, or direct them to the podcast in iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, however you get yours. And don't forget to visit www.patreon.com/smartpokerstudy to support the show and collect some nice monthly rewards. Until next time, study smart, play much, and make your next session the best one yet.